Hello, this is Dr. Eric Bricker, and thank you for watching AHealthcareZ. Today's topic is EMTALA and hospitals as insurance. Now, EMTALA is an acronym, and it stands for the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, and it is a federal law that was put into place in the mid-1980s, and it says that hospitals must stabilize and treat all patients that come into their emergency department and come into their hospital, regardless of insurance or ability to pay. Now, believe it or not, before this law was put into place in the mid-1980s, hospitals used to dump uninsured and poor patients on public hospitals in medically unstable fashions. So, like, if the patient couldn't pay, they wouldn't necessarily take care of them if they just happened to show up at, like, random XYZ hospital. So the government put in place a law that said, look, if anybody shows up at your hospital and they are on death's door and they're deathly ill, you cannot dump them, regardless of their ability to pay. You have to take care of them, okay? Well, that's the law, okay? That's how it's been ever since the mid-80s. Now, think about those types of severe, serious illnesses that come into a hospital, like MIs, it stands for myocardial infarction, that's a heart attack, a stroke, trauma, like a motor vehicle accident, septic shock. I mean, not only do these people come to the emergency department, but they oftentimes will need to be intubated and put into the ICU, and their stay could be days or weeks or even months. And those hospital stays could be hundreds of thousands of dollars each, if not millions of dollars each. I personally have seen this, where people have come in with no insurance, incredibly ill, and they have been in the hospital for a very long time. Now, and by the way, like stabilized, like they were like unstable for a very long time. Like they were on teetering on the edge of death and unstable for a very long time. And it was very expensive for the hospital. And the hospital wasn't going to get paid anything. Okay, now, why do I say the hospital was not going to get paid anything? Because this EMTALA is an unfunded mandate. So the federal government said to hospitals, look, you have to take care of everybody, but we're not going to give you any money to do it, okay? So what does that mean? That means that all hospitals share risk. And by risk, I mean clinical risk. So in the community around that hospital, there is risk of incredibly sick people that have no insurance and no ability to pay. And guess who bears that risk? The local hospital. And so that's why I wrote up here, hospitals are kind of like insurance companies because they have to bear the risk of the health of the community. Now, turning to insurance companies. Insurance companies are largely regulated at the state level. What do states require of insurance companies? They require what's called deposit requirements because insurance companies, by definition, take on risk, whether it's an auto insurance company or a health insurance company especially for their fully insured groups and for their individual groups, right? But when they take on this risk, the state says, but you've got to have X number of dollars in financial securities, cash, blah, 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 in order to be able to pay the claims, right? Because anybody could just start an insurance company, collect premiums, and then when people actually got sick and required the claims to be paid, they could be like, oh, we went out of business, we don't have any money, and they just went off and went to Las Vegas with the money or something like that, right? So the point is that the state requires the insurance company to have these deposit requirements or reserves. Guess what? Hospitals assume community health risk as well. We just said that. They're not regulated by the Texas Department of Insurance or by the Illinois Department of Insurance. So what do? How do they acquire reserves to account for this public health risk that they have to take on? They get their reserves from employers. That's right. We've said a gazillion times on this channel that Medicare doesn't really pay enough to cover the cost of care. Medicaid doesn't pay enough to cover the cost of care. So where in the world is the hospital going to get money to cover all of these EMTALA requirements? They get it from employers. Now, if we put ourselves in the shoes of a hospital CEO, like, we're going to try to accumulate as much reserve money as humanly possible from anybody who will pay it to us, including employers, so that, like, if there is, like, pandemic flu, if there is a natural disaster, if there is something that causes tons and tons and tons of very sick people to come into my hospital, I have to take care of them regardless of their ability to pay. So I better amass a treasure trove of money just in case that happens. And nothing is going to stop me as a CEO from wanting to acquire as much money as possible to help me sleep at night because of that. Now, I'm not here to offer a gazillion solutions today, but I will say at the end of the day, maybe hospitals wouldn't feel the need to hoard money from employers if the government actually did some type of reinsurance or funding of EMTALA. So maybe that's the kind of health reform we should be asking for. It's a thought, and that's my point for today. Thank you for watching AHealthcareZ.